welcome Jackie to my fireside chat with Black educators. This is an attempt of me really talking to Black educators that I have connected with throughout my years in
Mhm.
education, and just wanting to hear from them and their experience, and currently what they're doing, and advice they could give to this new generation of educators that we need in K through 12 education. And so this is part of a larger work that I'm doing with the Watson Power Foundation and our flagship initiative called Teacher Village. And Teacher Village is a program for pre-service teachers, kids who are coming out of college, who we would want to recruit into the teaching profession. As Black educators, to have an impact on the lives of students of color, and all students, for that matter. And so great to have you here with us on the show today. And so just have a few questions that we will wrestle with. And sometimes these questions, your answers may spark another question that wasn't listed, but it's just a conversation that we're having in a living room with one another about our time together in education and your experience, and other people just get to listen in on it. So that's
Okay.
that's kind of the vibe of it. All right. And
All right.
so for those that are meeting you for the very first time, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got into the field of education?
All right. So I am Jackie Johnson. I have been in education for 20 years. I started about a month after September 11th. I just needed to do something, not even just more challenging, but I just needed to do something with my life that had more meaning. I was working in sales, staffing, and it was a commission based job, but I just felt like that wasn't fulfilling enough. And I had always thought about teaching. I even played school as a child, like I had these fictional students and they had little name placards and everything, and I designed lessons for them. And but I just knew money wasn't there, and I think that just kept me away. So I came into the field and I never left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, how would you describe then your journey into education? Is it a calling? Is it a job for you? How do you describe your time and journey in education?
I would say for the most part, it's been a calling. If you don't have a good sense of emotional intelligence and really like self regulation, I think it can become a job. I felt it was definitely a calling in that, I my day is made when I just hear a kid go, "Oh," right?
Mm,
Or I just get a nice note sent or left, or when I see growth in test scores, and I don't know, it just there's a totally different type of um, I guess feeling, a type of motivation that you have to get up and go to work every day, when it is a calling as opposed to a job. It's a job, you're like, I don't feel like going today, so I'm just going to call out. But in this case, I'm like, no, the kids need me. I need to be there.
mm. Now, how did you learn that? You used two words that distinguished between a calling and the job. You said emotional intelligence and something else. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, our jobs as teachers, just like when you're a parent or you're in the medical field, you're so accustomed to taking care of other people that I think that sometimes you forget about yourself. And it's very common with dedicated educators that we're constantly pouring into our students, the staff. You know this because I remember what type of leader you were, and then you were doing that as well as you had a church congregation. So we're constantly pouring into other people that sometimes we forget that we have feelings too and needs and things we need to take care of. Sometimes we need, that mental health day, where I
That's
don't
right.
know. whatever it is that you have to do, you just need to reset and remember that you're important too. And I think I didn't have that in the beginning, and it's one thing that if you don't have it, I really feel like no matter how great of an educator you are, it will lead to burnout and may very well turn you off of the field. So
Mm. And we're going to get into that a little later about the self care and some of the tools and things that would help brand new educators that are coming into the field to stay for the long haul. And so, because you've been in education for a while now, how many years has it been for you? And what has been your experience in terms of the K-12 experience? What levels have you taught, subjects, and things like that?
So I started off at the elementary school level for a few years. I did middle school for the bulk of my career. And a few years ago, I decided to go back to elementary because I hadn't been in it in so long. I've never been in a high school. I am currently at a K-8 school, and this is my very first private school. Prior to this, I only did public and charter schools. So this is a totally different experience.
And how many years have you been in education now?
20.
20 years.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. When the average educator is probably about 5 years,
Yes.
and so this is incredible. So there must be something that you're doing or something that you're experiencing that is keeping you rooted in this work. So why do you think, though, that it's important for students to have access to a Black educator in their K through 12 experience?
So for Black students, I believe that it's great because they need sometimes professional models. They sometimes our educators just lack empathy, don't know how to make the connections with our students. And so I just feel that if I'm a Black student and I have a Black educator in front of me, that's either something I can aspire to be, perhaps someone that I feel a connection with, and perhaps that I can trust with my education, because I'm sorry, there's a lot of distrust. For some folks, they feel like some of our schools, the purpose of them are to have this pipeline to prison or pipeline to, certain types of jobs or keeping you in a certain class. And so that's what I would say for my Black students. For my non Black students, I feel it's important as well because, I don't know what they're learning at home. I don't know what they're watching, what kind of books they're reading, what their views of African Americans are, what their day to day contact, if any, that they've had with Black people. So I feel like it's just important for representation, for us to just, show like I'm a great citizen. I value you, you value me. It's just, I don't know. I could go on and on about that part.
Yes, and let's stay there for a second because I think that's important. I think that's something that is missed in the conversation when we talk about the impact that Black educators have in K through 12 education. We spent a lot of time, of course, talking about the gap with Black educators and the students that are in front of them.
Hmm.
But we rarely talk about the data that also says that it has a positive impact on non-students of color to be taught by a Black educator for those very things that you just spoke about. It has something to do with representation and stereotypes and just all of these things that are implicit bias and all of these things that go into play when you don't have connection and contact with other people of color or from other, let's say, marginalized groups. And so you're currently at a private school, at a Jewish private school in particular. Now, can you talk about like what that has been like for you? I mean, like this is crazy. This is unique. A Black woman, like African American, born in America, Black woman who grew up in the city and got educated, went to school, got her credential, and been teaching in public schools, traditional and charter, like you said. But now you've taken on this new role, this new task of being at a private Jewish school. K
Yes.
through 8. So what? How did that happen? What drove you to do that? And what has your experience been like?
I wanted to do something different. And I honestly, I think sometimes, we operate in areas where we're just comfortable. You're in a comfort zone, and I honestly, I think I could have just kept teaching in the inner city with my eyes closed, like and my hands tied behind my back. I had been doing it so long, and I needed a new challenge. And sometimes you just want to see, like, can you make it somewhere else? Can you learn
Mm,
something somewhere else? Can you take what you've already learned, go teach someone something somewhere else, and take things back from there? Because ultimately, my plan is always to go back to the neighborhood school.
mhm,
But
mhm.
I wanted to just, it's kind of like studying abroad, you know,
Ah.
to have this new experience somewhere else, doing something kind of familiar, but in a different place.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
And it is definitely very different.
Yeah, and how so? How so? How's it been different just in terms of student teacher relationship being at this school versus like your traditional public school in the inner city?
Yes. So one, um, I don't think they've ever had a black administrator here. There are four other black people who work here. Two teachers, I'm sorry, excuse me, four teachers, two that are a part of the PE department, and then one elementary school teacher and one high school teacher. So I would say, one, it's great to have a black administrator here for the black professionals that are here, right?
Mhm,
Two, all of the students are Jewish. Like, that's part of the requirement to come to school here. But it's important to have relations with these students in that they might not see black people all day long, or they went to a Jewish school before they came here. They're going to go to a Jewish school after this. And I really don't know, again, what their dealings are with African American people, especially because they live in Beverly Hills or Beverly Hills
mhm,
adjacent.
mhm.
Um, I would also say that in terms of my relations, though, the students are very respectful. And the parents, I don't know if it's because they haven't had a black administrator or they haven't had a lot of black teachers, they compliment you. They constantly are praising you for doing what I think are the basics, you know,
Mm, mm,
communications, uh, empathy,
mm.
explaining things, just, um, basic things that I think are just great things that teachers do.
Yeah,
I'm constantly commended for that. So
yeah.
I just had an opportunity to teach a class for 3 weeks because we had basically a transition period where one teacher left and a new teacher came
Mhm.
in. And so I taught this all girls group, and I absolutely loved it. I see those girls in the hallway and they're just like, "Hi, Miss Johnson." They're just so, I don't know, very
Yeah,
pleasant, very
yeah,
pleasant. Yeah.
yeah. That's great. That is so good. You know,
Right.
being again 20 years in this game,
Mhm.
all varied experiences that you have. COVID hits, and even before COVID hit, there was a crisis.
Yes.
There was a teacher pipeline crisis where teachers were quitting, retiring,
Mhm.
and there weren't many thinking about coming into the profession.
Mhm.
COVID hits and it just escalated and exacerbated the problem. And that's just in general with teachers. But then
Mhm.
we dig down further and think about Black educators and the lack thereof. Where do you think would be a good place to start in trying to solve this crisis in education when it comes to recruiting and retaining Black teachers? Where could we start? Where could we start?
Um,
First, the
well,
recruiting part,
right,
and then the retaining part. So, because I need more people like you who will stay in this thing for 20 years, right?
right, right. I remember when we used to work together and we would meet people who we knew were possibly just going to be in the profession for a few years.
Mhm.
And it was always difficult to to know how to navigate that relationship. And one way you want to help the teacher, because you know ultimately in helping the teacher that it's going to help the students. But at the
Right.
same time, you recognize that with programs like TFA that sometimes we lose people in the field,
Mm-hmm.
and you put all this time and effort into them and then they go on somewhere else and it's like, okay, well that's just lost.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this balance. I just feel like we need to be honest with people before they come in the field
Mm.
about what they're really signing up for. What is this commitment that you're
Mm-hmm.
making? Not just you're signing this contract for this year, but,
Mm-hmm.
but what does it really entail? What does a typical day look like? I don't really know if people outline that for candidates who are interested in teaching, or even when you're trying to recruit them,
Right.
you
Right.
know? So I would say I think we need to be candid about that. I think that there needs to be more mentorship,
Mm.
whether it's that the school is pushing it or there are other initiatives like outside initiatives that are helping to recruit these individuals,
Mm-hmm.
um, and not always just going to the traditional places of the colleges where kids are or where students are graduating. I
Mm-hmm.
actually only thought about teaching because I happened to take an education course that allowed me to see to travel to a different school every week,
Uh-huh.
and then come back to the classroom and talk to the professor and my classmates about what we saw at charter schools, at public schools, in private schools, in a parochial school, whatever, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so it just kind of, it gave me, kind of a tour guide of what schools were like, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to thinking, oh, it's just the way that it was when you went to school.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. That is so good. You know, I was thinking back of the first time I had experience being taught by a black teacher. And
Mhm.
I was fortunate to have had a black teacher for the first time in third grade.
Mm,
And then the second time I had a black teacher, it was an art teacher in middle school. And then it was a PE/government teacher in high school, English teacher in high school, and then a college professor for math. So as I think
mm.
back over my educational journey, I've had contact with at least five black teachers. What about you? What was when did you first experience a black educator, and what impact did it have on your life?
So for the most part, I've always had black teachers, and I
Really?
probably can speak to what it was like not having a black teacher and
Mm,
understanding the importance of why I felt I needed it.
mm,
So I went to school to a private school that was owned by African American family in the Crenshaw district for a few years. I think that's like kindergarten, first grade, and then I transferred to public school. I went to La Tierra, which at the time it was a big shift happening. A lot of this is when white flight is happening. So
mm-hmm,
my Caucasian classmates were basically all gone by third grade. And my instructor that year was a strong African American woman who just, I mean, she just had it down. Like
uh-huh.
to this day, Miss Brooks, she is just the end all be all. God rest her soul. And I say that because I didn't see what was happening, because when you're a student, you really don't see what your teachers like everything that they're doing. But once you're a teacher and you reflect back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how that woman was working. She had the groupings, I mean, all the extracurriculars, anything you could think of, the field
Mhm.
trips, everything was just all in the classroom. And I'm like, but I don't know if that would have happened if I didn't have a black teacher, honestly.
Mm, yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's a difference of having someone again where it's their calling versus it's a job.
yeah,
And she went above and beyond, and that's how I knew it was a calling, right?
yeah.
And why she continued to do it so long. She was definitely at probably close to retirement age when I met her, when I'm in her
Mm-hmm,
class. And so then from there, I just continued to have Black teachers. But the first year I didn't have a Black teacher, oh my goodness, it was
Huh.
like, it was hard. It was fifth grade.
Mm.
And I was
Wow.
like, can I get out of this class? Can I please go to Miss Hawkins' class?
Huh.
And that lady, she knew how to dress.
Yeah.
I,
That's
um,
right.
I'm like, I can't do the suit here.
Yeah.
It was just different. It felt like she was just really rigid, and this was her
Mm.
plan. This was how she was going to do things. She was about the book. She rarely did anything outside of it, and
Hmm. So
that didn't
really,
work.
so it was like a lack of relationship building, and community building, culture building, even in the classroom, huh?
Culture building, but I'm saying even in the planning of it, it was just,
Yeah.
that one of those teachers that is like turn to page blank and do the
Yeah.
questions at the end of the chapter. That was like my first time having that experience.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't recognize it until later on, the implications of it. I just knew like this is just how it is. As long as I
Uh-huh.
study these spelling words and I take this test, and
Right.
it was just
Right.
very routine. But it
Yeah.
was so predictable. There was nothing
Yeah.
original, nothing, no connections,
Wow.
no nothing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, then what advice then can you give to new educators who may be watching, who are thinking about coming into the profession, um, on how to build relationships with students? Because it's, when teachers come into the classroom, they're going to be in teacher education programs. They're going to get the hard skills, classroom management, cultural responsive pedagogy, DEI, and all that kind of stuff. But my argument, in the Watts of Power, as an organization, our argument is that we need to be training educators in the soft skills. And some of those soft skills are student teacher relationships, understanding your neighborhood, knowing what's your job description versus what you go above and beyond. So, yesterday I was talking to Tunji Adebayo, one of our colleagues, and
I
we
love
talked
him.
about, yes, we talked about how he went above and beyond, and how we often go above and beyond uh, of what's in the job description. So, it wasn't in the job description to show up to their basketball games, their football games, cheerleading competitions. It wasn't
Mhm.
in, all these kinds of things. So what advice could you give to a new educator who's coming into the profession, or thinking about coming into the profession, about building relationships with students?
Um, I was actually going to use that example that Tunji gave you as a starting point. My very first year as a teacher, I taught in Watts, um, a 2-3 combo. And then my next year was a second grade class. And to this day, I still remember the number of invitations that I received for birthday parties and can you please go to my game? And even when Christmas would come around, the types of gifts that the kids gave, that they gave from the heart, and they just really valued your time. If you spent time with them and showed an interest in them outside of what was in the book, what was on the test, you just remembered a conversation from the Friday before of what they said they were going to do on the weekend, and you check back in with them on Monday about those plans. It just went so far. Like you could get those
Hmm.
kids to do anything. And
Yeah.
it honestly makes your job easier. It shouldn't be about them wanting to please you, but it does. It makes it so easy when you have the relationship, because there are certain ways that you can lean into those kids and push those students in ways that you couldn't do if you didn't have the relationship.
Mm.
So I would say I just had a meeting with a person who started 2 days ago. So here it is, January. Our
Hmm.
semester is going to end in 3 weeks, and they're starting fresh. And although she's been in education for 10 years, my advice to her was it honestly doesn't matter so much about the content that you teach in the next 2.5 weeks leading up to our winter recess. You really need to work on your classroom culture and building the relationships with those students.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're not going to get very far in the second semester. So I would
Yeah.
rather you spend this time on, as you just said, those soft skills, Spend
Mhm.
this time on learning more about your students. Um, surveying them, allowing them to have more say in how classes run. Meaning, like, I don't care how that wall is decorated over there. What
Right.
color scheme do you think we should go with? Or, how should we do our fun Friday? Should we play Kahoot? Maybe there's another game that they're interested in. But just getting their buy-in, I find it just goes a long way. And then it
Yeah.
helps you as a teacher because guess what? It's not so hard on you, and it's not a job. It becomes so easy, so fluid to get through your lessons because you have those relationships.
That's right. That's right. Wow. When when you think about your teaching experience and your journey, I
Hmm.
know there have been times when you're like, you know what, I'm about to find something else to do. I'm done. Like I was talking to another one of our colleagues the other day, Edith, and she was like, every 5 years I was trying to find a new job, and then her husband called me and said, you know what, she's lying. It's not every 5 years. It was like every other month. And so, but when you think about even your teaching experience and your journey that you have had,
Hmm.
what do you think could have been different, that would have been helpful for you, as you're able to look back
Mentorship.
on mentorship? What
I
kind of
mean,
mentor? What? Because there I know that they're like, think about BITSA, right? You have this
no,
mentor.
no,
Like, tell me about the mentorship that you're talking about.
definitely not bits of, definitely not the stipend that some administrator pays someone to help you first get started. Not that kind of mentorship.
Uh-huh.
I mean, someone like yourself who's been in
Mm-hmm.
the profession for a while, who's not going to, run away at the drop of a hat, who's, kind of like, they've been through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And can, when you need to be talked off the ledge, they can bring you back down. The person that you can go cry on their shoulder, or the person that when something great happens that you want to run to and tell them, hey, guess what happened in my class today, or look at my
Mm-hmm.
data. you
Yeah.
know um I would say it again, that's about relationship building. And sometimes when you enter the new schoolhouse, you don't know who to lean on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have some teacher colleague friends that I met many years ago when I first started, and Janice will say, oh, when you first started, you just asked too many questions. So she stayed away.
Uh,
In my second year, I started just listening more, not
mm-hmm.
asking as many questions. And then I would just you know, kind of gravitate to the folks who were really doing exciting things in their classes. I would
Yeah.
sit, in the meetings with them. Like, you don't always have to be with the same people. Go and, I would say chat it up with other folks, and go walk around your school. Ask people, can
Mm-hmm.
you come in their classrooms? That's honestly how I learned more, was getting out of my space and getting into the space of others. But again, that requires the seasoned people to make room,
Yeah. Yeah.
time.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. My last question really is around something that we started talking about in the very beginning, which is self care.
Hmm.
A lot of times, as educators, we will um, put in a lot of work, a lot of hours, grading papers,
Hmm.
taking time away from family, lesson planning. I mean, just a ton of things, and I always feel like there's still something that we need to do, right? And it begins to wear on you, and before you know it, you're skipping lunch. When I was talking to Tunji, he's like, you're skipping lunch, you're not drinking water. Sometimes you're not even bathing yourself. I mean, it can get to that point, right? And
Right.
so, how over the years of your educational career, how have you learned to incorporate self care into your regiment as an educator?
Right. So I'm gonna say this. I have not perfected it.
Mm-hmm.
I have days where I skip the lunch. You need to get the work done. There's certain things that are not going to wait. Um, but for the most part, on my calendar, I've literally put a space there for myself. So it's a reminder. you need to go to the restroom. You need to go get something to eat. Even
Mm,
if I don't eat it, it was like before this meeting, it was on my calendar. Go get my food so that as soon as the meeting is over, I can go right into eating my lunch.
yeah.
I would say just setting certain boundaries at home. I know that basically before 7 o'clock, I'm not going to touch my computer. It just doesn't matter. I'm not,
Hmm.
the emails are just going to keep coming in anyway. So if I left the computer up, then I'm going to be tempted to respond every time something comes in because I want to stay on top of that. But
That's
I
right.
have a 14-month baby and I really need to give her my time. If she goes to sleep at 7 or 7:30, then those emails can wait until after that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, at work, I'm on the basement level. I make myself go to the restroom on the third floor so that I'm constantly walking up and down the stairs. So that if I don't get to the gym, at least I'm getting some exercise. I take walks during the day. Sometimes when I have a meeting, I ask someone, "Do you mind if we walk instead of just sitting here in the office?" Uh,
Hmm.
I find that even though they think we're just meeting, that's my part of my self care. So I just think that, especially once you become an administrator, you have to be really creative because the meetings just never stop, the emails
Yeah.
never stop.
Yeah.
So you have to be creative in putting yourself first.
That's right. That's right. Well, good. Well, that was really all the questions that I had for you. I guess I would just end by saying, is there anything else that you would like to add to this conversation that I didn't ask you?
If it's about retaining or first recruiting and retaining Black educators, um, again, I would say if you have the opportunity, go check it out. Like, really, I know during COVID that's going to be difficult, but even if it's
Hmm.
just, can I go sit in the Zoom? There are people who have never taught and they're getting into education and their first experience is Zooming. Like,
Right.
that's
Right.
tough, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's already hard enough to teach in person, but Zooming, I would say, can I join someone else's Zoom? Like, because
Right.
I want to know, like, what's the expectation? What's the experience like? What is the experience like for the student as well as for the teacher? If
Hmm.
you know a teacher, yes, I would hit them with a bunch of questions and keep their number, as we say, you keep them on the Rolodex, that's the old term. But
Hmm.
speed dial. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. I think that's honestly one of my number one regrets
Yeah.
is sometimes we get to a point where we don't ask for help and
Yeah.
we're drowning. And I think honestly, that's why we end up leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big parts of why a lot of teachers leave and quit because they feel like that they don't have the help that they need. A lot of times because they aren't seeking it out or because it's not readily available and accessible to them. And so that's why we are trying to attempting at creating Teacher Village because we believe it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to keep a teacher in the profession.
Yes, I can attest to that. As a member, I'm going to still call myself a current member of your village. I can
Yes.
definitely attest to that. You have to have that group, and you're going to have those days. And if you don't have that person or group of people that you can, relate to and rely on, it
Mhm.
it's tough. I don't know how people do it without, the village.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Jackie, for spending time with us at this fireside chat with the Watts of Power Foundation as we embark on our journey with Teacher Village. We want to again extend our heartfelt gratitude to you and the work that you're doing currently at the private Jewish school as one of
Mhm.
the Black administrators making an impact on the lives of students in this
Yes,
world. And so,
yes,
thank you again, and I hope that we can connect again soon.
yes. Thank you.